Welcome to our, I was about to tell you how many of these we've had over the years, but I don't know. It's our monthly update for May of 2017. I was going to start with a moment of silence for Mr. Comey, but I won't. And the reason is it would set a precedent, and given the number of people he's likely to fire in the next few weeks, it would make it impossible to run these things. As usual, I want to start by thanking the three institutions that make these monthly events possible. The first is the Judson Memorial Church, in which you are currently sitting. They have been extraordinarily kind and generous in making this space available to us all this time. It's a relationship we value, and they've been kind enough to say, which I think is interesting, that what we do here the second Wednesday of every month is part and parcel of what they take to be their mission as a church in this culture. I really couldn't ask for more of an endorsement than that, and I thought I'd share that with you. The second institution is the Left Forum, and I always mention it because they help produce this, but it's especially important now because this year's Left Forum will take place from the 2nd to the 4th of June, so literally in whatever it is, 3 weeks or so. And so I wanted to ask one of the co-directors, Marcus Gretsch, who's in the back, to come up and just say a few words of encouragement for you to think about coming to this extraordinary event, which is going to be bigger and better than ever this year. Marcus.
Hello, thanks for having me, Ray.
You'll have to forgive Marcus his Spanish accent.
Yeah, my Spanish accent. So the Left Forum is Europe's most biggest, in terms of attendees, events of the left in the United States, or even in North America. And I would even say, for a large part, as far as I know, even maybe on the globe, it's more than 4,500 people showing up at the John Jay College now for several years. And we have now the panels, and it will be 350 different discussions on all sorts of issues where the left is engaged with. It's about, of course, very much about the Donald Trump administration, how to fight back, but it's also about the different visions and utopias people have in terms of where we want to go to. The key events will be on Friday night, where we talk about the challenges of state repression, both like police brutality, for example, but also things where Jeremy Scale, for example, would talk about the drone wars, which are being heavily used now more by the US administration in the Middle East, but also in other places around the world. And we will have Linda Sarsour speaking about how Muslims, for example, are being attacked by the current government and other people here in this country. On Saturday, there's a big event where people from Standing Rock and also from the women's movement will reflect on the resistance from their point of view and try to bring all those different issues together and, well, maybe discuss the possibility of a more unified force against the different forms of oppression we all basically witness each day. So Madonna Thunderhawk, for example, will show up, and Chase Iron Eyes, that's leaders from the indigenous movement. We will have Titi Bataratia, who will talk with Cynthia Rousseff, excuse me my language here, about the women's strike and the women's struggle, which not only happened in the last couple of months, but I mean, it's a history, and there's still a long way to go, as we know, because most women still even don't have any equal pay. And then on Sunday, Rick Wolff will be together with people who supported the Bernie Sanders movement and also other people to talk about the beyond capitalism question. So at least to give us all an idea about where we could go next. Throughout the conference, there will be several meetings, also spontaneous meetings, not only these workshops and panels which are being proposed, but I heard there will be some more meetings about the question of developing a new formation or a new organization. As we know, the United States is pretty much controlled under on a two-party system, like Republicans and the Democratic Party. And many people are discussing since several years now about the opportunity and maybe the necessity to do something different. And I've been told they will do so at the Left Forum. You can all engage in this. You can participate in those discussions. We usually tell our panel organizers that they should not, like I am doing right now, just give some lectures. They should engage you in that whole discussion they are doing, right? So that's actually the thing. Another form of to participate is to volunteer, to help us. We need 200 people on site to guide people from A to B, but also to help maybe already in the office. I mean, as you can imagine, to get 4,500 people to the John Jay College in a city like New York, where you almost get, I don't know, every third second or something, a new thing popping up where they where they wanted to invite you to. It's a pretty hard task. I mean, you might think that with social media it gets all easier to get actually to some people, but actually it's almost the opposite. It's way different to organize these days than it used to be maybe 10 years ago. So I would be happy if you all enjoy, if you attend. Go to www.leftforum.org to find out about the whole program, which I will put up soon, and where you can register, where you can also register to volunteer on site or visit us in our office. That's near the Empire State Building, or give us a phone call. You find the telephone number on the website as well. Thank you very much.
Could I have hands again if you have an empty seat next to you, because we've got some folks who are looking to find a place to sit, and it would be kind if you would help them locate an empty chair. Okay, so could you put your hand up if you have a chair that's not occupied near you? Okay. Anyone still looking for a chair? Okay, we've got some. This is about the 5th month in a row when we are outrunning our chairs, and so we're going to have to try to figure out a larger space. But I hope you share with me that that's a nice problem for this sort of activity to have. Okay, and the third organization that brings this to you, the organization that I work with, is called Democracy at Work. You can see our logos and banners and all the rest down here in front of me and on the wall behind me. And at the very end of tonight's talk, before we adjourn at 9, one of the local people in the New York City chapter, we now have in about 15 cities across the United States, Democracy at Work chapters doing things just like this that we're doing here all across the country. These are people activated by the kinds of things we do. It's wonderful for us to see this emerging, and it's a sign of people not only getting clearer in their minds about what's going on, but becoming able to commit to make something change in the world, and that's been a long time coming in the United States. So those are the three organizations, and I want also to recognize tonight's sponsors. We have asked for, and I'm asking now again, if anyone who is seeing this on YouTube or in any other way, or anyone in this room is interested in sponsoring and helping to pay the costs of doing all of this, we welcome sponsorships. And tonight's session is sponsored by Brad and Barbara Markley, who describe themselves as a working-class couple from Lehighton, Pennsylvania. So I wanted to thank Brad and Barbara for their help in covering the costs of tonight's recording, particularly to put this up on the web, where it'll be by this time tomorrow, if not earlier in the day tomorrow. I appreciate the support of Brad and Barbara Markley, and if any of you are interested in becoming a sponsor or know someone who might be, just go to our website, democracyatwork.info/sponsor, and all the information you could need is available and ways for you to pursue that with us, and we will immediately contact you about that. Also, if you are watching this on YouTube, you may have noticed that we also now have on YouTube a video version of the weekly radio program that I've been doing for years and that I continue to do. We invite you to help us fund that show and keep our channel free of corporate advertisements on our Patreon page, Patreon. If you're interested, go to patreon.com/economic update. That's the name of the radio program. And you can see it there, the video version of me doing my radio program. It's a little bit like Rush Limbaugh program as you watch him doing the program. The content's a little different, but other than that. Okay, let's turn then, as we usually do, to some shorter items before we jump into the major topics for tonight. And even though these are shorter, they all kind of tie together in a way I think you will find interesting. So I'll begin with the Wells Fargo Bank. I always like, if I can manage a way to do it, to pick one of the large corporations in our society and beat them up. Figuratively, of course. It gives me enormous satisfaction, and I suspect from your faces that it's not so bad for you either, especially since it's me who's doing it, so you can enjoy it, not much risk at your end. And I don't mind the risk. At my point in my life, I can enjoy it. So here's what Wells Fargo has achieved. It's one of the largest banks in the world, one of the largest banks here in the United States. But they've been having hard times for the last 6 to 12 months because they got caught. I don't mean getting caught at money laundering or manipulating interest rates or manipulating foreign exchange. They got caught at all that too, but that's not what I'm talking about. They went one step further, or actually, as you're going to see in a moment, 2 steps further, and I don't want you to miss it. The first step, and this takes a kind of bravado, you really have to kind of admire. Over the last, ready? Over the last 15 years, they created something in the order of 2 million fake accounts. Here's what I mean. They set up an account in the name of a person who never agreed to the account, never asked for the account, never signed for the account, didn't even know they had an account until the bills started arriving for all the services on the account they didn't know they had. And poor Wells Fargo did this for years and years, involving thousands of its employees. How do we know that? Because when they got caught, they proudly said, well, we fired thousands of people for doing that. Thereby admitting, smarties that they are, that they knew all about this and had been, in fact, managing it quietly, hoping that they wouldn't get caught. They particularly went after Hispanic American families, apparently thinking that that was a fertile area in which to hustle people into fake accounts. The stock of the Wells Fargo dropped like a stone because it turned out lots of people were afraid there would now be lawsuits, which there are, and there would now be investigations, which there are, and it all came to a head just a few weeks ago at the annual meeting of the shareholders, where a sizable group of shareholders were very angry because this behavior, which was profitable all those years, was now not so good because the share price had collapsed of the company, and they were shareholders and they were not happy. So something like 40 to 45% of them voted to oust the directors who had been in charge of this illegal, immoral, unethical horror show. And they would have been able to do it, which is very rare in American big corporation. They might have voted out the entire slate, but for the single person who happens to own 10% of Wells Fargo's shares. This one man owns 10%. That makes you a billionaire right there, but when I give you his name, you will understand. His name is Warren Buffett. So he voted his 10% of the shares to keep those directors, because after all, stealing and inventing accounts for 15 years is a small kind of thing, and you shouldn't fire somebody simply because they did all those things. So I want you to admire. The board of directors has survived. Mr. Warren Buffett continues to make very liberal statements, but meanwhile, he's doing what they do. And it's how this country's business community is governed. But I told you there were two things about Wells Fargo I wanted to mention to you. Likewise, at that meeting of the shareholders earlier this year, there were a group of people who had figured out from the public record that Wells Fargo was one of the major banks lending money to the Dakota Pipeline Project. You know, that project that decided it's so important to add more oil and gas to the world's excess supply of them that you must run the pipeline right through the land of the Native Americans that is holy for them, that's been in their hands for a long time. And there's something peculiarly American about wanting to stick it to that group of people again in our history. And so the question is to keep going. Obama had slowed that process down. He had withheld his approval, as many of you know. Mr. Trump has reversed that, has allowed it to go ahead. But it can't go ahead if the companies involved can't get financing, and they have to turn to banks. Interestingly, the effort of people to fight against it, starting with the Native American people directly involved in the Dakotas, has been successful. Norway's bank, which was a big investor, has quit, gotten rid of all its loans. It will make no more loans. Very interesting. The ING Bank, a very large, one of the biggest banks in the world, a Dutch bank, same thing. But the two major American banks that are paying for it and lending money have so far refused to respond to the requests to withhold financing until they at least reroute the pipeline so it doesn't do to those people even more damage than we've done in our history. Wells Fargo is one of them. They really have a wonderful record. The next time you pass a Wells Fargo office, and if you live in New York City, you can't go more than 100, maybe 150 feet without that happening. The next time you go by, think a pleasant thought. And who knows, a kind of thought that's appropriate to their behavior, and something might happen to the window. It would be coincidence, but there would be some poetic justice, which is, of course, the only kind of justice we're going to get in this situation. If you're wondering what the other big bank is, Citibank. Don't mispronounce that. Don't make this into a sh sound, because that gets you into another place, and I'm not going to go there because we're in church, you know. So I'm not going to do that. All right. So much for the Wells Fargo Corporation. While I'm on lovely issues of this sort, let me turn next to an argument that you've been hearing about, which is so amazing to me as an economist that it kind of takes my breath away, but I need to go over it with you so you are not fooled by this. I hope that most of you know, that I've read, that American corporations have been holding huge amounts of money in accounts overseas. And that's because of the tax law of the United States. If you can make the claim that the money you have, say your Apple computer, which is one of the major doers of this business, if you've sold lots of Apple computers in China or in Africa or wherever it is, then you can take that money that you've earned by selling all of that stuff And if you keep it in an account, the money, overseas, you don't have to pay taxes on it. It's profit you earn without taxes. You have to pay taxes on the profit you earn for goods produced and sold in the United States, but not on your foreign operations. So American companies have been keeping more and more of their money in foreign accounts because then they don't have to pay the taxes that the government levies on them. Some of you have heard about things like tax havens. You know, the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or Switzerland or Luxembourg. It would take me all night to give you the full list because there's so many, these countries competing for the fees of holding that money for American companies who, by holding them money in these other places, don't have to pay taxes here. Okay, so you know that this is a scam. It is extremely bad for the United States. Why? Because we're talking about, ready, hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes, which would otherwise go to the American government and make it possible either for the American government to do all kinds of things for its people that it isn't doing, or lower the taxes on the rest of us because the corporations are paying profit taxes as they should and would otherwise be required to do. So it's very bad for the rest of us, very good for the companies. And by a little clever accounting, they can make profits appear anywhere in the world. They have subsidiaries everywhere. That's easy to do. And so we've accumulated more than $1 trillion sitting in foreign accounts. Only the American business community could then come up with the following idea. Gee, you American people, I'm being polite, say these corporate executives, you American people. It's a terrible shame that all that money is out there. If you would bring it home to America, then it would be here and available to do good and funny things here, which it can't do because it's there. And the way to bring it from there to here is to give them a tax holiday. I told you this is going to take your breath away. In other words, because they have cheated the United States out of taxes for years, that becomes an argument to give them a tax break now. To let them say, if you bring it home in the next 6 months or a year, you'll either pay no taxes at all or maybe 5% or way less than you would otherwise. It's, in other words, a reward for having done what they did. And now comes the best part. This should be done, by the way. This is something that has been proposed not only by the Republicans, but by the Democrats also. Okay? So now the argument goes, why do we all want this? Because if the money comes back, you see, it will be available here in the United States, and it will be invested, and it will create jobs. The minute a businessman or woman starts justifying anything he or she is doing on the grounds that they are a job creator, try to find a large rock in order to express your rage at what is about to be told to you. So let me give you the example in this case. We're going to bring the money back if you give us the right tax break, we big companies. And we're talking about the biggest companies doing this, Apple, Google, all the big names that you're familiar with. Here's the problem with all of this, which they're counting on you not to know, which is why it's important for me to explain it to you. Over the years, these big companies have realized that they don't have to do without the money that they've got stashed away in foreign accounts in order to avoid paying taxes. Here's what they can do, and this is what they've been doing. They've been going to American banks, and indeed to foreign banks, and they have been, ready, borrowing equivalent amounts of money. In other words, you're a big company, you have $200 billion sitting in accounts in Europe. You borrow $180 billion here in the United States. You pay record low interest rates, 1%, 2%, 3%. Meanwhile, you're saving 35%, which is the corporate profits tax rate on the money you've kept abroad. So you're not doing without the money. You have all that money. You just did it in this indirect way by borrowing. And guess what they did with the money they borrowed, these big companies? Did they go on an investment binge to hire lots of workers? No. They buy each other. It's a big use of the money. Mergers and acquisitions, it's called. They boost up the stock price by buying back shares of stock from the public. And they raise the salaries of their top executives. That's what they use the money for. And here's what it means, folks. When the Republicans and the Democrats give them the tax break, the low rate to bring back the money, they'll bring back the money taking advantage of the no taxes, and they'll pay off their loans with that money. End of story. They will have made out like bandits. There are no jobs that are going to be created by that money. There isn't free money because it'll come back to pay off the loans they made in the interim while they waited. And you and I will have been ripped off for years of this hustle. And the only thing worse than the rip-off of us is their ability to present all of this as a contribution they're making to the fiscal crisis of the United States. If that doesn't take your breath away, I don't know. I can do somersaults and try to do it that way. But this is really better. It's extraordinary. And that this is repeated, this nonsense, by our corporate leaders and their politicians in their pockets just tells you how bad this system is and how far gone it is. All right, next item. Monopoly. Coming back into the American economy in a big way. That's usually a sign of decline. When companies can't quite make it by producing goods, they start eating and absorbing one another. And you see a lot of that this day. I just want to mention 3 of them that are important in American society and have become more important literally over the last few months or years, and in some cases the last few days. Sinclair, which is a company that operates television stations around the United States, just bought this last week the Tribune Company. That makes Sinclair the largest owner of local television stations across the United States. Sinclair is an extreme right-wing, politically oriented corporation. They are now going to be the major determiner of what is seen on medium and small city television screens across the United States. They made a lot of money by merging these 2 companies. You will live with the results of having one company controlling the vast majority of medium and small television. Number 2, perhaps not so well known, but the same kind of thing. The Coach leather bag company. You all know them, they're on Fifth Avenue, fancy bags. They just purchased this last week the Kate Spade Company, another high-end lady, I believe mostly for women's bags and so on. $2.5 billion merger, but that creates a mammoth monopoly in that kind of women's accessories, and that will change the dynamic. Stores will close, stores will merge, jobs will be lost as these 2 companies consolidate and make money by saving on the 2 separate institutions that are now going to be one. But here's the 3rd one, and here I want to thank Mr. Warren Buffett. He came out the last couple of weeks since we met last in April by saying that he's disappointed with his fellow billionaires for pushing so hard on Mr. Trump and the Republicans to lower the corporate income tax rate. It's currently technically at 35%. Very few companies actually pay that rate, but the official rate is 35%, and the proposal of Trump and the GOP is to reduce it to 15%, which, by the way, is a hefty reduction by anyone's arithmetic. And Mr. Buffett says, this is crazy. And here's the argument he gives. He says 30 years ago, corporate taxes amounted to 4% of the total value of goods and services produced in the United States, what we call the GDP. So corporate taxes were 4%. He says today, corporate taxes are 2% of the GDP. In other words, the real portion of our production that the corporations have to pay in tax is half what it was 30 years ago. That's a hefty tax cut they've already enjoyed. This is the way it is before any of these cuts proposed by Mr. Trump and the GOP get voted on. Then Mr. Buffett does a very interesting thing. He says, that's not the real problem for the United States. He says the real problem for American business, listen to him, is the absurd cost of health care. Oh, how does he explain that? He says, well, 30 years ago, the total cost of the health care of the United States, that's 4 industries: doctors, hospitals, the producers of drugs and medical devices, and the medical insurance companies. Those are the 4 industries which, if you put them together, could be called, and I would urge you to do that, the medical industrial complex. It's the analogy to Dwight Eisenhower's military industrial complex. We have a medical industry. Those 4 industries work out very nicely with one another, which is why we end up paying what? 25 years ago, 5% of the GDP of America went for health care. Today, 17%. So whereas the tax burden dropped by half, the cost for medical care went up 4 times. Wow. Why is Mr. Warren Buffett worried? He says because United States companies have to compete with the rest of the world, and the American companies are spending a fortune paying for the hospitals and the doctors and the drugs and the medical devices and the insurance. It's hurting business. He's angry as a businessman that one group of companies has a stranglehold on something everybody else has to pay for. That's what a monopoly is. It's a company that gets a stranglehold on something. It's the only provider, and so we all have to pay whatever they want. That's where the medical profession is. That's where it's gotten itself to. It's very important. It's a monopolized industry, which is why it gets an outsized amount of money. The United States spends more on these 4 industries, the healthcare industries, than any other industrial country. No other country comes close to spending what we do. And the medical outcomes in the United States are mediocre. Our longevity, the length of life that Americans have, is about in the middle. It's not the best, not the worst, it's in the middle. What happens to young children in the first year of life, the illnesses they have, the length of time in the hospital, all of those kinds of issues, we're medium. Now, folks, if what you're getting is a medium-level product, but you're paying more than anybody else in the world for that stuff, you'd know something is wrong. You don't need a PhD for this. In fact, if you have a PhD, you probably learned how not to see this sort of thing. You're just being ripped off. And that's what makes this medical care issue a constant kind of irritant in our culture. So I have to end this part of it by saying a few words about the events since last we met, when finally the Trump administration and the leadership of the Republican Party were able to persuade a few remaining Republican congresspersons to change their vote by playing around with a fund for people with pre-existing conditions, for those of you that follow this material. And so the Obamacare was repealed. It's just in the House. We're going to have to see what the Senate does, so it's not yet gone. We'll see what the Senate does. But the House of Representatives voted to get rid of Obamacare and to replace it with Mr. Trump's and the Republicans' substitute. So let's see what that means to our medical institutions. Number 1, does it do anything to reduce what I've just told you about, the absurd overpayment, overcost of medical care in the United States? No, it doesn't. But to be fair, the Obamacare didn't do anything about that either. Obamacare gave coverage to millions of people who didn't have it before, and Lord knows that's a good thing. But did it attack the monopoly? Not at all. And Mr. Trump's repeal doesn't attack the monopoly either. So if you're looking for a relief on the absurd cost of medical care, you're not going to get it neither with Obamacare nor with the Republican alternative. So what was the goal here? Well, I'd like to spend a lot of time worrying you about the details of medical coverage, but I don't have the time, and it had nothing to do with what happened. There's nothing I can tell you more bluntly than that. Here's why Obamacare was defeated. Because Obamacare extended the coverage for medical insurance to about 20, 25 million people, depending on how you count, who weren't covered by insurance. It's a scandal. In every other developed country, everybody's covered by health insurance. From the time you're born to the time you die, you're covered for medical insurance. That's part of your right as a citizenship. As being a citizen of a country. It's like your right to go into Central Park. When you feel like having a walk or a picnic, you go to Central Park, and that's your decision. You go when you go, you stay as long as you like, you're done. And you don't pay money to anybody. That's how you get health care in the rest of the world. But not in the land of the free, the home of the brave, and all of that. We don't get that. So Obamacare did give it to a bunch of people who hadn't before. There were still millions who didn't get it, but a lot of people who didn't have it got it. In order to make all that work and to keep the drug companies happy, the government also mandated that you had to have insurance. Okay? And here comes the bad part of Obamacare for the people who support the Republican Party particularly. How did Mr. Obama pay for extending health insurance to millions of people? How did he do that? He taxed the richest people in the United States, and only them. An extra tax was attached to people who earn, individuals, $200,000 a year or more, to couples who earn $250,000 as a couple per year or more. And even those rich people only paid on what they earned above the 200 or 250 cutoff. That's a tiny percentage of Americans who earn that kind of money. I'm not going to embarrass this room by asking you all to raise your hand if you earn more than $250,000 a year. I'm afraid I probably can guess that if you do that, you're not here this evening. And it wouldn't be so hard to figure out why that might be. So Mr. Obama taxed the rich in order to extend medical insurance to among the poorest people in the country. He did that. He gets the credit for that. He did that. Mr. Trump and the Republicans know who pays the piper. They know where their money comes from as a political party. It comes from the people with the money. And who are those? The people who were hit with the tax to pay for Obamacare. So to get rid of Obamacare was to turn to the richest people in America and give them a whopping big tax cut. That's what this was about. That's all this was about. The rest was verbal bullshit. That's a technical term in economics. I don't use that a lot because it confuses people, but it gets you right to the heart of what's going on. But of course the Republicans and the president could not say, we're getting rid of this bill to give a big tax cut to the richest people. That doesn't sound good. So they had to come up with something else. And nothing works as often and as well for conservatives as beating up on the government. That's how you do this. So suddenly we were all told Obamacare mandates things that people have to do. It says you have to have something. You have to go out and buy something. You have to spend money. You have to do this. A mandate. And Republicans began to develop poetry. Very hard for Republicans. And the poetry was, the government is overreaching. The government is telling us what to do. The government is mandating. Can you imagine? Then there's people like me who go, what? Let me give you some examples of mandates of the United States government that every one of you accepts. There's a law which says, if you don't give your kids into the public school system, you're going to jail. You're going to get arrested. It's a mandate, isn't it? You want to drive a car? You're going to buy car insurance, because if you drive the car without it, we're going to arrest you. If you have a little business and you make some money, you're going to pay taxes. That's a mandate. So the notion, we shouldn't have a mandate. We're surrounded by mandates. There's a mandate that if you cross the street, but not at the corner, but in the middle, the police can arrest you. You must do it at the corner. You know what that's called? A mandate. The stupidity of this would never be possible if you hadn't trained the people to think that the government is going to do something bad, and I'm going to vote with the Republicans so the government can't come in here. It's like what we saw a few years ago when there were old people marching around. Remember that? Saying, government, keep your hands off of our Medicare. Because those people didn't know that Medicare was a government program. They didn't know. The government was portrayed as evil. So we have this discussion of the terrible government coming in and doing something to us. It's extraordinary. It's also lunacy. And what it does, though, it's a lunacy that obscures what's going on. We gave a tax cut to the richest Americans. That's what this was about. It had to be hidden as all kinds of other junk about mandates and government overreach and independence and American values. That's another stunner. Family values. The same people who voted down Obamacare talk endlessly about family values. Clearly, it will help a family hang together by not having medical insurance. Clearly helps families to work real well. By worsening the inequality in our society, by cutting taxes for the richest people. That's a big help to families, too. The hypocrisy, the lying here, it's not as spectacular as firing Mr. Comey, but almost. Almost. While we're on the subject of taxes, another one. The Republicans and Mr. Trump have now announced that they're going to eliminate the estate tax. Oh, I've got to tell you about the estate tax. What is the estate tax? Let's remember. The estate tax says that when you die, you can't take all of it with you. In other words, you leave wealth behind. And that wealth, before it is passed to your heirs, your children, or whoever you want to give your wealth to, is required to pay a federal estate tax. You're taxed on the value of what you leave to the next generation when you die. But the federal estate tax has been whittled down by rich people over the years. So today, here's how it works. This is going to come as an enormous relief to many of you. The first $5.5 million that you leave is exempt. If you're part of a couple, the first 11 million, twice 5.5, is exempt. I can see a lot of you exhaling, realizing, whoa, thank God, you've escaped. So, who pays the estate tax? Only people who have so much wealth that they have more than $11 million per couple to leave to the next generation. This may not be a problem for you, but for Mr. Trump, it is. And for Mr. Warren Buffett, it is. Well then, let's do the arithmetic. What is the average percentage that people who actually have an estate that's over $11 million, by the way, last year there were 5,000 of those. Let's be clear now. In America, the population is 325 million people, and we had 5,000 estates that had to pay federal tax. So you were talking about the richest of the richest of the richest. The average rate they had to pay, 17%. Okay, let's redo. If you're rich, the first 11 million you leave, that's the power of words. The first 11 million, you don't pay any estate tax on. On the remaining millions or billions, you get to keep 83%, you pay 17% to the government. That is what they're proposing to eliminate, so that the 5,000 richest people in the country, millionaires all, don't have to pay 17% of what they leave. The federal government earned last year $23 billion on this estate tax on the rich. That's $23 billion less the federal government will have to give loans to students, to take care of the old folks, to maintain the roads. And why are we going to do that? So that the richest people in the country will become even richer than they were before. If only I had the time, I would stop and start singing the Star-Spangled Banana so that you could all enjoy what kind of a society you live in. And all of this is presented how? By the Republicans. Could they go around and say, and by the way, many Democrats go along with this. I don't mean to suggest it's all that big a difference. And I'm going to come to that in a minute. Do the Republicans say, well, we got a great idea. We're going to cut the taxes of the richest people in America? No, they can't say that because that doesn't sound good. So they had to come up. They really had to stretch on this one. But the Republicans have shown they're up to the challenge. So they began telling a story years ago that we want to get rid of the estate tax, and then they began telling a story about a farm family, Clem and Lucinda. They worked very hard raising chickens and hogs, and slowly, after shoveling unconscionable amounts of what those animals leave behind, they had a big, successful family farm, and what they wanted to do was to leave it to little Clem and little Lucinda so they could shovel too. But the nasty government came in and said, there's an estate tax. Therefore, the estate tax is said to be, ready? The killer of family farms. And who would want to kill a family farm? It's like stepping on a baby or something. Nobody in their right mind would want to do that. So I checked how many family farms were in the 5,000 estates that paid federal income tax last year. And there's a number. The federal government told me. 50. 50 out of 5,000 were family farms. They made that whole stuff up. They made it up because it flies in this country. They made it up in the same glib confidence of being able to get away with it that enabled the President of the United States to say that he fired the head of the FBI because he didn't handle his opponent's email investigation correctly. Huh? What? You have to be very far gone to find all of this as reasonable as the media do. All right, next. France, and what happened there and what it means. France is the second or third largest economy in Europe, a very important part of the world economy, but very particularly important in Europe. So what happens there politically and economically is relevant really to the whole capitalist system, but certainly to Europe. France has a presidential system, and in their system, all the different parties put up a candidate for president if they wish. There were, I believe, 11 of them at the first tour, it's called, the first time. All 11 run, and the two candidates with the most votes, top two vote getters, then have a runoff a few weeks, 2-3 weeks later. And that runoff was last Sunday. Okay? So in the first round, there were 5 parties that did pretty well. And the other 6 got very small votes, so I'm going to concentrate on the 5. One of them was the traditional center-right party, the conservative, the party of Sarkozy and the recent leaders that are sort of like they're a conventional Republican and Democrat. This man's name was François Fillon, F-I-L-L-O-N. And he was scheduled to do real well and perhaps be the next president of France for 2 reasons. One, his logical opponent, the head of a socialist party. France has a socialist party, which, as I'm going to tell you in a couple of minutes, is kind of like our Democratic Party, but it's called socialist because in France there's a long history of the Socialist Party. And the Socialist Party had the presidency, a man named François Hollande. Okay? Mr. Hollande came in, won the presidency a bunch of years ago by promising, and this is crucial now, promising the French working class, if you vote me in as president, I will get rid of austerity, will stop all this stuff of laying public workers off and cutting wages and helping the big banks so it trickles down to everybody else. I won't do that. I'm a socialist, after all, he said. And so I'm going to help the economy revive by building from below, helping the people at the bottom and building the economy back up. That way, vote for me, and the French voted for him overwhelmingly. The Socialist Party not only won the presidency, they became the majority party in the French Senate and the majority party in the French National Assembly. They controlled everything, sort of the way the Republicans and Trump now do here. As soon as he was elected, Mr. Hollande caved in on everything, reversed himself, basically became another austerity administrator, making the French people hate his guts and all other parts of him too. He had popularity levels that would rival those of Mr. Bush in his worst moments, Mr. Trump, where he's rushing to now. We'll get to that shortly too. Like 9% of the people thought he was doing a good job, and the other people wished him a speedy death. The French people were so angry at him that he didn't even run for re-election, which would normally have been his behavior. He quit. He didn't run. So Mr. Fillon, the Republican to Mr. Hollande's Democrat, the kind of mainline establishment, slightly to the right, but very namby-pamby in the middle. Mr. Fillon was thought to be a shoo-in. Nobody could challenge him. The socialists were out of favor. The further left people, no one took seriously. There was this crazy lady on the right, a woman named Marine Le Pen, who has a party that believes, I kid you not, that she's going to make France great again. It's an attractive slogan. It must be because people like her and him like it. And she hates immigrants. Oh boy, is she against immigrants. She wants to do things to immigrants I can't even tell you about. It's beyond building a wall. So she hates immigrants, and she's going to make France great again. Exactly how she's going to deal with this, nobody knows, and she doesn't say. But they didn't take her seriously either. Mr. Fillon was to be the elected official. Then Mr. Fillon made a mistake. Or to be more accurate, he got caught. He had been a preacher of austerity, that the way France was going to come back and be an important economy was by tightening its belt. Everybody has to sacrifice. Everybody has to do with a little less income. Everybody has to do with a bit fewer in government services. Everybody has to do with a little bit less. And then the poor slob got caught having created no-show jobs for his wife and both his children to the tune of €1 million. That's more than $1 million a year that he, as a government official, was shoveling to his family while preaching austerity to everybody else. This hurt his popularity badly. So he went from Mr. Number One to who? And he came in third, which meant he was out of the running. What about the Socialist Party? Completely collapsed. The Socialist Party is so detested in France that it went from the number one party to this time, nothing. They had fielded a candidate, Mr. Hamon, and he came in with a roaring 6% of the vote. Even Mr. Fillon, the screaming crook, had 20%. But not the socialist, who was honest. Or at least he hadn't been caught. And then there was a surprise, a real surprise. From the far left, left of the Socialist Party, a former communist in France, French Communist Party is an important organization, a man named Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and you're going to hear his name again in the years ahead, comes in and he basically puts forward a Bernie Sanders kind of, he's going to tax the rich, and he's going to really do this, and he is going to be something really different, and he roars in and gets 20% of the vote. That's a real surprise. Okay, so the two top winners, a guy who worked with Mr. Hollande, the hated socialist. His minister of economics was a man named Emmanuel Macron, which is close to the French word macaroon. And in France, he is widely known as Mr. Cookie. To give him the respect that he deserves. He is a cream-filled, this is dangerous where I'm going here, so we'll leave. So Mr. Macron is the new president because he defeated Marine Le Pen. They came in first and second. Le Pen got about a third of the votes. Mr. Macron got 2/3 of the votes, so he's the president. He's never held political office before. He has no political party because he was in the Socialist Party, but when the popularity of the Socialist Party went down, he left. He was a man of courage, you got to understand, a man with principles. Of the kind of, this way, with these sort of principles. He knows what his principles are because of the way his finger feels when the wind hits it. While he was the Minister of Economics for Mr. Hollande, Mr. Macron was famous for one thing. He wanted to bring flexibility to the labor market. That's another one of those phrases, go look for that rock. Flexibility means making it easier for employers to fire you. The French working class, like much of the European working class, worked 100 years throughout the 20th century to get a whole raft of protections. You can't fire someone in France the way you can in this country. You have to have reasons. The fired worker can go to court. You have to come forward with a whole network of reasons, and if your reasons are no good, they will reinstate you, and you will be paid a penalty as well as your back pay. And there have to be very good reasons. There's protections for workers. I know that's hard here in America to get that idea across, but in other parts of the world they have that. You know, running water, toilets, and protections for workers. They had that in France. He wants to get rid of that. He wants to make flexibility. He wants to lay off all these extra government workers. It's more austerity, folks. Now let's do some numbers. I added up all the people that are eligible to vote in France. I counted them. And I asked myself, what percentage of the eligible voters did Mr. Macaroon get? The answer is 43%. Half the people who voted for him left the polls and explained to the journalists, I wasn't voting for Mr. Cookie, I was voting against Marine Le Pen because she's a fascist. That's what they said. So if you ask, what percentage of the French voters were actually interested in Mr. Cookie? And the answer is very few. They don't know him real well, he's never run for anything before, and he's associated with those socialists who betrayed everything they stood for. These are not good recommendations. Mr. Macaroon, therefore, has a real big, fat problem. Nobody likes him, and he's just starting out. Nobody wants the policies he's already committed to. Half the French working class, enraged by the decline in their standard of living, are now voting for Marine Le Pen. They've decided the bad thing that's happened to them is those damn immigrants that have been let into the country, so they're going to fix France by kicking them out. And they're going to make France great again by celebrating French culture. More foie gras. 3 times a day. They're going to develop a new breakfast cereal. Poor geese, poor ducks. I don't know if you know how that's done, but you don't want to know if you don't know, so I won't tell you. It's a disaster what's happening in France. The other part of the working class, however, gives us some hope, because the other part of the working class didn't go for the socialists. They were betrayed by the socialists. They went for further left. They went for Mr. Mélenchon. He got about 20% of the vote. That's not much less than Ms. Le Pen got. And in fact, if you put Mr. Mélenchon's vote together with the little bit that are left in the Socialist Party, that together becomes 27% of the vote, and that's more than Mrs. Le Pen got. The newspapers here are full of the struggle against the right wing by pretending that there is no left wing, but there is one, and it voted, and it's in the millions in France that it voted. What's happening in France is a split of the country, and that's why I'm talking about it, because it's not so different from here. One side goes to the right, that's Mr. Trump, and one side goes to the left, that's Mr. Sanders. Yes, it's not exactly the same, but you can see how different people looking at a system that isn't working for them, that makes the future look even grimmer than the present, and they're saying, I'm not voting for the traditional Bush and Clinton. They don't look good. They're like Fillon, even if they haven't been caught yet, doing the same thing. And this leads to a final point about this. Socialism. Few words on socialism because it is changing, and it's changing very fast. And we need to understand that because it's going to be impacting here too. Socialism begins as the other, the alternative to capitalism. Socialism is the name slowly developed in the 19th century and into the 20th for people who looked at capitalism, the system we have, and said, pew, we can do better than that. They thought that the way to do that was to take private enterprises and make them government enterprises so that they would work for all of us, like the government should make it work. That they wouldn't be enterprises making profits for the few who owned them. They would be enterprises doing well for everybody because the government owned and operated them for everyone, sort of like the government operates the Central Park or the beach or the other things that are done for us as a community. That was the old idea. And to make it work even better, they weren't going to let the old socialists, they weren't going to let the market decide who gets what. If there were scarce ice cream cones, they weren't enough to go around to all the children, they wouldn't in the end be sold to that kid who could offer the most money for the ice cream cone. You oughtn't to give the ice cream cone to the person with the most money, especially since you never ask how they got that money. That there are better ways to distribute ice cream cones than giving it to the one with the most money. How about giving it to the one who hasn't had an ice cream cone for 6 weeks, rather than the one who had 6 yesterday? Well, there's other standards for how you distribute. And the old socialist idea was, well, we should distribute according to people's needs and not according to how much money they collected. So we shouldn't distribute by the market, we should distribute by government planning that distributed according to the need. So the old socialist idea was the government would take over production, family farms and factories and stores and all of that, and that the government would plan the distribution. Capitalism was private enterprise and markets, and socialism was public enterprise and government planning. Okay? That led to what? It led to 2 kinds of things. Number one, it led to revolutions against capitalism, successful ones in Russia in China, in Cuba, in Vietnam, in lots of places. And so they set up those socialists, what they thought they were supposed to do. The government took over the enterprises, and they planned the distribution rather than private enterprise and markets. And they achieved some things, but they paid a heavy price. The heavy price was a concentration of power in the hands of the government that proved to be unworkable, undesirable. It was an experiment in socialism that taught people, okay, if that's what socialism is, we got a problem with where it goes. It did really good things too. Let's be real careful. The Soviet Union grew from the poorest country of Europe to the superpower number 2 after the United States across the 20th century. No mean achievement that no other country ever did, with one exception. There's one other country that has grown as fast as the Soviet Union over an equal period of time, and that country is the People's Republic of China, which does suggest something that if you want to go from being poor to rich, the way history suggests you ought to do it is to do what the Russians and the Chinese did. Let's all pretend I didn't say what I just said. That's how you be a good American. You pretend you didn't hear what I just said and you don't know nothing about it. That's the reality. So it achieved something, but it paid a very heavy price. And the price is so heavy that the Soviet Union couldn't even survive its own failures. Despite its achievements, it couldn't survive the concentration of power. And the Chinese are very similar in what's happening there. Cubans are a little bit different because they've recognized the problem and they've decided that the future of Cuba isn't government enterprise and planning. It's a transformation of the enterprise. The issue, it turns out, for the Cubans isn't whether you're private or public. The question is, are you a top-down, undemocratic, dictatorial enterprise, or are you a worker co-op? And the Cubans are deciding to go in the direction of co-ops and have become one of the few countries in the world that's made a real commitment to it, which we will see how that works out. The other thing that happened to socialism in countries like France and Western Europe was that they stopped being about an alternative system of any kind. What they became were people who said capitalism's fine, it's just a little rough around the edges when the conservatives run it. Give us the vote and we'll make it a nice, softer capitalism. You know, it'll stick it to you at the workplace, but it'll give you free schools. It'll stick it to you at the workplace, but you'll have national health insurance. We will create a safety net. We will take care of people while we work you to death, which is better than being in a country which works you to death and doesn't take care of you along the way either. And socialists became people who believed in capitalism with a human face. That's what happened in France. The trouble is, capitalism, for reasons I'm going to end today with, capitalism is not letting that play out. Capitalism in the countries of Western Europe and North America and Japan can't afford socialism anymore. That's why the socialist parties are disappearing. It can't provide a human face. It can't provide free schools. It can't provide free health care. It can't do it. And it isn't going to do it. Well, let's be careful. I don't want to be misunderstood. Do we have the resources to do it? Of course we do. But the way this society works, those who have the wealth are determined, almost like lemmings rushing off the end of the pier to their own doom, to accumulate more and more. That's why even the richest ones, like Warren Buffett, are saying, stop with this craziness. Don't cut corporate taxes. The government needs to do a bunch of things. It's almost as though the richest of the rich are looking around and screaming at their fellow rich people, don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. We are rich because this capitalism provides a certain basic something for the mass of people, and if we don't do that, that mass of people will eat us up. We better give up part of what we have, or else we'll lose it all. Very old problem. But they're deaf. They don't hear. They don't hear the left. They don't hear Mr. Warren Buffett, their own man. They can't. They're on a drive that has no limit. We don't want an estate tax. We don't want a corporate tax. We don't want you to take care of uninsured men. It's craziness. But it's the craziness of people who can't see beyond what they've been trained to do all their make money. Make more money. Use your money to make more money. And let the chips fall where they may. And the chips are falling, and they're being lit by sparks, and we're in deep, deep, I'll use another technical term, doo-doo. Why? And this is the closing for today. Why are we in deep doo-doo? And here I want to give credit, I don't do this as often as I should, to a brilliant writer. His name is Stephen Roach, R-O-A-C-H. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. Former chairman of Morgan Stanley Bank of Asia, the firm's chief economist, currently a senior fellow at Yale University's Judson Institute of Global Affairs, as well as senior lecturer at Yale's School of Management. I can tell you it's stunning that I recommend him because I have a long history with Yale University, and people like him are very rare at Yale University. Most of what goes on there has the gravitas, the depth of insight of a very, very, very thin pizza. So in any case, he's the exception. He's the exception, and I want to recognize him. He works on something called Project Syndicate. If you ever want to look at it, it's all available on the internet, www.project-syndicate. Does wonderful analytical work. And so his recent work is called A World Turned Inside Out. And this explains why socialism is having the history it has and why we are in the dilemma that we're in. Basically, he says, over the last 20 years, everything has changed. A world turned inside out. And he drives the point home as follows. Over the last 20 years, the developed capitalist world, Western Europe, North America, Japan, has been growing at roughly 2–2.5% a year, the production of goods and services. Whereas China, India, and the developing world has been growing 2 to 3 times faster. So that 20 years ago, 60% of the world's production was in the old centers of capitalism, only 40% in the new centers, and now, 2018, it's reversed. 60% is produced in China, India, and Brazil, and the rest of the world, and 40%. The center of capitalism is gone from the places it was born in. That's particularly important for you, because you happen, unfortunately, to live in the wrong place at the wrong time. You live in the place from which capitalism is leaving. That's why there are empty factories everywhere. That's why half the stores on many of the avenues of New York City have been empty, sitting there for months, if not years. That's why Detroit is a hulking wreck of a city where it once was the center of American capitalism. That's why Marine Le Pen gets her biggest vote in the industrial cities of northern France, which have no jobs anymore because they've all moved to China and India and Brazil and everywhere else. To be blunt, but to be clear, it's over. Capitalism has moved on. It's the same system, but it can make more money someplace else. It can make more money in the very places it ripped off in order to make this the center of the world. Asia, Africa, Latin America, ripped off so that the people have nothing, are used to low standards of living, would be grateful for any job, no matter what you pay them, way less than you have to pay an American. So the corporations are making their decisions. To use a technical term, screw the Americans, or the French, or the Germans, or the Italians, or the Japanese. We're going to China. We're going to Vietnam. We're going to Indonesia. We're going to Brazil. We're going where the labor is cheap. And that's where the wages are growing. Let me give you just one statistic. Over the last 15 years, wages have been stagnant in the United States. They've gone up 6 times in China. Let me do that again. You understand? Imagine if I were looking at you and I told you that your wages had gone up 6 times in the last 15 years. You'd jump up out of your chairs and run off to the mall to spend some of it, because you haven't been able to. But the Chinese have been. They've got more smartphones per person than Americans do. Why? Because they can afford it. That's where capitalism is exploding. We are where capitalism, and there's no nice way to say this, is dying. And with it go all the creature comforts. What was once affordable, nobody wants to afford it. The rich are making out like bandits because they're the ones who are paying the low wages over there. They're making the big profits. That's why all the expensive restaurants in the Hudson Yards will be full as soon as they open, because the money for that is there. But for the mass of people to have that American dream, the car, the home, the college education, that's over. That was already over in 1970, but you got a 25-year reprieve by being able to buy everything on credit. But you've run out of the ability. You can't borrow anymore because you haven't got the wages to ever pay it back, and everybody knows. Just like Leonard Cohen's song, everybody knows. Listen to that song again, because it's in there. It's in there. That's why the Socialist Party had to betray. It can't. There is no way to salvage what has happened to capitalism without changing the system. If we stay with this system, it will take us down with it. And that's going to be the issue of the years ahead. Who has the courage to say it? Who has the courage to draw the implications? And what in the world does it mean? It can't mean having the government take over and having the government plan. We've been there, we've done that, and we see where that goes. Some of it worked well, and we'll hold on to that part of it. But turning everything over to the government, not going to happen. And the socialists who keep talking like that find that their audiences are deaf, won't respond, will not go there. So you have to, if you're going to be a leftist, you have to come up with something else to make it once again reasonable for people to say, yeah, we want socialism because we don't want capitalism anymore. It's not working for most of us. It's scaring us as to where it's pointing. Us, and for our children even worse. So there has to be some other way to go. The right wing will come in and say, yes, 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 you're being screwed left and right, but it's all the fault of those immigrants. And if that isn't enough, those black people. And if that isn't enough, the Jews. You know, it's the same candidates. It's boring. It's old. But there's reasons. What is the left going to do? It can't play that game. So the left has to come up with an alternative. And the alternative that's emerging now is pretty clear, which is why we call what we do democracy at work. You're going to have to get rid of the capitalist system where it lives, in the stores, the factories, and the offices. You're going to have to stop making it a profit-driven system for a tiny group of people to make the money and have that be the bottom line. The people have to sooner or later say, no, 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 the bottom line is the quality of life we have as a people. The opportunities to develop ourselves, our education, our skills, our communities. That's what the bottom line is, not the private profit of a handful of our people who are shareholders or wealthy people. The ones who can buy the politicians so they don't even have to pay the estate tax. Come on. How many times are we going to be kicked in the face before we understand? It's done. Every system, I know you've heard me say this before, every system, slavery, feudalism, ancient tribal structure, every system the world has seen was born, evolved and changed over time, and then it died. That's why we don't have massive slave plantations anymore. That's why we don't have feudal manners anymore. Capitalism is just another system. Instead of master-slave or lord and serf, we've got employer and employee. They're not going to last forever. They've had 300 years. It's enough. And they're not doing real well for us. I can understand our brothers and sisters in China and India who want their shot at the wealth we once had. Maybe they'll stay with it. But for the West, for Japan, Western Europe, North America, you know what our future is? It's Detroit and Camden and Cleveland and Lille, and I could go on and on. The people of Detroit watched that city turn into disaster over 40 years, from 1970 to 2010. The president couldn't do anything, the governor couldn't do anything, the mayors couldn't, they all watched it dissolve. So don't tell me that Americans are not capable of standing there watching themselves dissolve as a society. And it is not going to be pretty. In a country that celebrates the cowboy, that wants to be able to have a gun in every pocket in every store and church and school, how this plays itself out ought to scare the pants off of you. It scares the hell out of me. When systems reach this kind of point, where the mass of people cannot stand them, where the only people who benefit from them are a small minority, you are creating an explosive situation. I don't know what the spark will be. No one does. Just like no one knew in the summer of 2011 that if a bunch of people set up pup tents in Zuccotti Park, it would become a global movement called Occupy. If they had asked you, those folks, what do you think about me putting up some tents in a park? You would have thought they were a little nutty. And you would have said, go ahead and do it, and then you would have gone on and had another drink. But we would have been wrong, those of us who thought that, because there was something going on, boom. And Bernie Sanders is something else going on, boom. There's more booms coming. They may not be as calm as those were. We may look back on those as quiet dress rehearsals for much bigger stuff. I don't mean to leave you with a sense of gloom and doom. So if it's too much, just remember, I'm only once a month. Television is forever. Thank you very much. I do have one announcement, as I promised. The New York chapter, Alan Schulman here, give him please 2 minutes of your time to hear about what was being done here in New York, so that if you're interested in participating, you can talk to Alan or some of the others from the group that are here.
Thanks, Rick. So, welcome to another episode of Capitalists Anonymous. You all come here and you know that the system is wrong. I mean, is there anybody who needs more convincing? And about a year ago, we decided that what we were going to do was to try to actualize the energy that was being dealt. You can't, really? We decided we were going to try to actualize the energy that was being produced through these monthlies at Judson, and we opened up a center over at the Commons in Brooklyn at 388 Atlantic Avenue. All of you should have gotten a flyer for our next meeting. We meet the third Wednesday of every month. But before I talk about our next agenda, I just want to recap what Rick went over. Maria and the staff will be selling rocks outside the door here, just in case you want to deal with the Wells Fargo issue in your own way, but we're not advocating.
No. All we want you to do with the rock is stroke it gently.
And tomorrow when you wake up and you have children at home and you want to explain the world to them, explain to them that the president of France is now called Mr. Cookie. And see what goes. We've grown over the last year. What we designed the center out in Brooklyn to do would be to catch two kinds of folks. Folks who were convinced that while the struggle against the inequities that we're all fighting against at the moment are real, that we had to be for something. And that what we were for was looking at the worker-owner co-ops that were springing up around New York and around the United States, and in fact the world, as not just good utopian experiments in proletarian socialism and democracy, but actually the building blocks toward an alternative economy. And it's starting to play itself out. And if you look at your flyer, what we're, Sean Abbott-Clapter and the young people of Syllabus, which is the first teenage, privately owned worker-owner co-op in New York and maybe even in the United States. It's a silkscreen printing co-op that was developed out of a high school, out of a social studies department in a high school in the Bronx, and is now located at the Point in a neighborhood community organization in the Bronx. And this is really like another building block. And the young people from Syllabus are going to be there, and Sean Abbott-Clapter, and a guy named Omar Freyelia, who was the founding director of green worker cooperatives in the Bronx, and they're doing phenomenal stuff. We also are sponsoring 3 different workshops at the Left Forum, and I don't know if Marcus is still here, but I think it's really important for you to understand that our effort is not simply to talk about worker-owner co-ops, but our effort really is to look at the institutions that have been representing progressive people for a while. And in this case, one of the workshops is going to deal with the relationship between the new economy and the Black liberation movement and the Black working class. I think Skirmahorn, who's here, put that one together. One of the workshops is going to deal with how do we deal with unions in an age of union retreat and an age of automation? How do we deal with worker organization in this thing? And the third, and Rick is going to be on that panel, is literally a look at the worker-owner co-ops that exist not just in New York, but in the United States and around the world, and take a serious look at them in terms of whether these things are really sustainable and the building blocks for something new. And that workshop's going to have Rebecca Lurie, who is the director of the worker-owner co-op program over at the Murphy Institute of CUNY, Pablo Benson Silva, who is the director and outreach coordinator for NCNOC, the New York City Coalition of Worker-Owner Cooperatives, and Sean Abbott-Clapter and the students and young people from Syllabus will be in that workshop. So we want to invite all of you to go to the Left Forum this year, and we expect it to be. But more important, we want to invite you next Wednesday out to the Commons. We're growing, but we're only growing because the people who are coming to our meetings want to do something. And while we don't have a really well-developed program yet, what we are doing is reaching out both into the co-op world, but also into the public education world. Our children are just not being prepared for the future in any real sense, and we've got to start to look at how the social studies community is really doing with that. And we have a political action group that's starting to look at electoral politics and who the candidates we can support who are advocating a different alternative economy. So I just wanted to invite you all out to the Commons next Wednesday. We start our meetings at 7 o'clock. We have the best hors d'oeuvres in Brooklyn. And once again, I want to thank Rick for another session. Rick Wolff.
I do have a final announcement. We will not meet in June. We will resume in July and August here, second Wednesday of the month. But in June, I will not be here, and so I can't do it. But I thought you might be interested. I will be in Frankfurt, Germany, where there is an international conference of people who want to make fundamental social change in Europe and who have decided that the way to do that is to build on an idea that actually began here, the idea of sanctuary cities. Here it began with the idea of a sanctuary, a place where immigrants who had problems with their legal status would be safe and could not be picked up off the street in the way that the ICE agents are doing. But in Europe, it has a much bigger meaning. It's the idea of the left, and you can see the news thinking that the federal governments are corrupted all over Europe. The top. That's not where the left should contest. That's not where the left is strong. The left ought to work at the level of the town, the village, and the city. It should become a sanctuary not just for the immigrants hounded by a system that has no place for them and wants to demonize and scapegoat them, but that the city should be the place where people can begin to gather and make the changes, political and otherwise, kind of under the radar. Let the federal political games play. Meanwhile, in each city, there is the development of real alternatives of cities that are sanctuaries politically, economically, and not just for immigrants. And it's a very interesting initiative, part of the left slowly groping as to how it can become a force that can shape what happens next as this capitalism disintegrates. So I will be going with great interest, and I hope when I come back in July and we meet to give you a report about what happens at this conference and how successful it is. We will try to send notices to remind you that we will not meet in June. I hope I see you again the second Wednesday of July.